Adaram, they say, whenever I leave the house, and on whatever thing my eyes fall on, Sabr. Allah Ta'ala says, Wallahu yuhibbu as-sabirin. Allah Ta'ala is lief with Adikina.
School governing body of South Coast Madrasa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the show. The 25th of November every year up until the 10th of December commemorates the 16-day campaign of activism against violence that is related to women and children. Naturally, subhanAllah, this is something that we as the Muslim community should be championing more than any other community. Today we're joined in studio by Moulana Aboo Baker Mahomed, someone who's no stranger to the viewership of ITV. He's been with us before highlighting World AIDS Day. Welcome once again to the studios, Moulana.
Jazakallah khairan, good to be back.
Alhamdulillah. Moulana, we mentioned the campaign commences with the 25th of November, or on the 25th of November, and runs up until the 10th of December every year. Why particularly these 16 days?
Okay, if you look at these are periods when children are generally completing their schooling career. It is a period close to Christmas where there is more of a festive period and people enjoy festivities. And this tends to create more freedom amongst people and also a need and a want for more money. So this would increase in violence. And of course, the target market would be the more easy targets, as we could say, which are women and children. Hence, we see that these 16 days of activism are no violence against women and children. And it is an international campaign.
So why the international campaign at this time of the year? Naturally, this suits the South African schooling calendar in terms of it being the end of the academic year, etc. But overseas, it's more or less just the beginning or the first quarter or first third of the schooling year. Are there any particular days that are commemorated? Naturally, last week we covered World AIDS Day being the 1st of December. Are there any other particular days that are commemorated during these 16 days?
Yes, in fact, the 25th of November, which commences this campaign, is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And the 10th of December is International Human Rights Day. So bearing in mind the 2 days that are celebrated, it's just apt that the 16 days of activism falls within this, because it is a great right and a human right that is being violated. Also in that period, we mentioned, as you mentioned, World AIDS Day, but there's also Universal Children's Day. And hence, because Universal Children's Day is also there, that's why it is a target for women and children and no violence against them. And the SA government has also chosen to run these 16 days of activism.
Well, we have 4 different days that are being commemorated here: International Children's Day, World AIDS Day, and the 2 other days you mentioned, marking the start and end of the campaign. The fact that there were 4 days, or there are 4 days in this space of time, meant that at some point these were necessary to highlight these particular plights or ills in society. Now an entire campaign spanning 16 days. What constitutes the idea of violence against women and children?
Now, if we look at violence, firstly, the 16-day impact would be to make people aware of the negative impact of violence on women and children, and to act and propagate the curbing of this violence. If we look at the violence, then it would stem from different avenues. One would be murder. Now, if we look at murder according to stats, then murder is one of the greatest acts of violence in terms of murder, is that of a man killing his wife. And in 2009, it was highlighted that one woman was killed by her husband every 8 hours. That is, if you look at in one day, 3 women were being killed by their husbands.
Are those statistics for the entire globe or just South Africa?
That was in 2009. It was a research brief, and that was only in South Africa.
So 3 women being lost every day.
In South Africa.
Being lost in terms of the loss of their lives. This is one constituent of what constitutes violence that this campaign seeks to highlight and create an awareness of.
There are others. Abuse. If you look at abuse, then statistics in Gauteng, coming closer to home, is at 51.2%. That's more than half of the women in Gauteng have experienced some form of violence in their lifetime, either emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. And 78.2% of men, or 78.3% of men in the province admit to perpetrating some form of violence against women.
Well, you spoke about psychological, emotional, physical, sexual.
Emotional, physical, and sexual.
Yes. So let's get an understanding of, emotional, sexual. Yes, we understand the connotations there. Physical as well, but emotional abuse.
Emotional would be by chanting certain wrong words. Women are very emotional by their nature, and anything that is said, even sometimes in jest, is taken very seriously by a woman. So one is by mentioning something that is wrong against a woman, by verbal abuse, where we mention things that are not accepted by women. A simple thing like if she prepares a meal and you really criticize that meal, it would have a great impact on her because she's put all her love and care into preparing that. So that's a simple example.
Well, just to understand this idea of emotional / verbal abuse, one of the prophetic traditions comes to mind when Muhammad ﷺ mentioned to Anjasha, Ruwaidaka bil qawarir, that, in a figurative expression, drive slowly with the glass vases or with the glass bottles, showing that the temperament of women is not necessarily that they're emotional, but they're generally soft.
Yes.
Soft in nature, and the mere expression of words, the choice of words by their male counterparts, husbands, fathers, brothers, or other male people living in their surroundings, could have a negative impact on them. So that gives us an understanding of verbal / emotional abuse. So far we've covered murder, we've covered different types of abuse. Is this all that constitutes?
No, there's of course, one of the major things is rape. And rape, in a research study, 28% of men have reported, perpetrated rape. Okay. And rape mostly in and the men that perpetrate rape, it's mostly in the teenage years. 75% of men that have raped are before the age of 20. That's the first time they have raped someone is before they reach the age of 20. So that shows the upbringing is something where we need to focus on. And men are also rape victims, and 3.5% of men that have been raped by men.
Well, most of the statistics you quoted are naturally from those who have taken it upon themselves, braved the taboos, the stereotypes, to actually speak out. I'm sure the figures, if we could get a true representation, would be much more alarming. Well, beloved viewers, this is a case of two men, myself and our guest in studio today, bringing to you and highlighting activism against women and children. No violence against activism, no violence against women and children. I think it's important to understand that this is also part of that initiative for us as the male portion of society, in terms of breaking that taboo, braving the cultural stereotypes, and actually speaking about these awareness campaigns so that more people can start speaking out and contributing to their campaigns. More about this after the short break. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, we've been speaking about the 16 days of activism commemorating no violence against women and children, a campaign commencing on the 25th of November and terminating on the 10th of December every year. Moulana, before the break, we covered some of the areas that constitute violence against women and children, murder, rape, etc. What are the triggers that generally, based on studies, lead to these forms of violence?
Right. Before we get to that point, I think it's no violence against women and children. So we haven't covered the point of children, and that's something that's very important. Why important? Because, of course, they are the growing segment and they are leaders of tomorrow. But if you look at the statistics there, then more than a third of girls have experienced sexual violence before they reach the age of 18. And it's either through unwanted touching, sexual abuse, forced sex, or being exploited into sex by older men. Okay, and 50% of children report occasions where in their lives where one or both parents are not there or in a drunken state. So they're not there to look after them. Right? And 50% of children experience emotional abuse, neglect, or witness violence against their mothers at home.
Two things that stand out for me. The first is the mention of most children, or a great percentage of children, living under situations and environments where they only have a single parent. That's something that hopefully we can touch on a bit later in terms of the social impact of the basic family home or family setting. The second was the mention that Moulana made with regards to the last statistic that you quoted in terms of children having to witness violence being meted out to their mums or to the mother figure in their homes. And that brings me to the next question, the question around the impact of this violence. We've covered, I don't think we've covered adequately what the triggers are. Maybe we can cover that and then look at the impact of these forms of violence.
Okay, if you look at the triggers, then I think we can maybe summarize it into 4 or 5 points. One is the poverty and social inequity. Now what happens is that because of our different classes that we have and a different perhaps economic scale, if you can use that, then people try and exert influence and show superiority by means of violence. And hence violence becomes something that to show that I'm the macho, I'm the man, and I'm the one that has everything, money doesn't count. So just to cover up that social lull that they're in. Okay. Then another thing is, again, what we mentioned is that widespread exposure of children being brought up with only a single parent, whereas children are being born in homes out of the marital...
out of wedlock.
Out of wedlock. And hence this contributes to them being vulnerable targets because they don't have their both parents to look after them. And sometimes when it's a single mother forced to work, the children are brought up by total outsiders in terms of knowing the child. So they're brought up by family members, but we know the mother's touch is the magical touch. So hence this contributes. If we look at studies of girls that have been experienced physical abuse at a young age, then they are more likely to be targeted and are more susceptible actually to be experiencing that at a later stage in their life. And the impact on boys that experience violence when in a young age is that they are generally social outcasts and they lead to being more violent when they grow up because of that.
So are we saying that statistics prove that those from the male species who have been subjected and have been victims of violence in their younger years, in their formative years as youngsters, are more prone to being the aggressors when they grow older?
They are more likely. Of course, stats are there, but they always don't play out as stated. So the thing is that they are more, because of the psychological impact it's had on them, they do have a more likelihood of being more violent, but it's not the only thing because there could be other factors in other people's lives, stress-related, which could lead them to violence later on.
Moulana, the next idea that we'd like to broach is the idea of the impact. One is looking at all the statistics and quoting them, and sometimes we become indifferent to numbers and to scales and to percentages, etc. But looking at the impact this has on the individual, on the family, on the community, and on the society.
You see, the most immediate impact of violence on health is seen in our health facilities, where an estimated 1.75 million, that's 1.75 million people, annually seek health due to cases of violence.
Wow.
as a cause of violence. All right, and women that have been raped at a risk of contracting diseases, primarily HIV, sexually
Which
transmitted
then
infections.
adds to the idea
Of World AIDS Day
being part of
incorporated.
the 16 days of activism.
Right? And many of them suffer from post-traumatic disorder, stress disorder, okay? Which if untreated, then it persists in the long term and depression becomes a cause and a way of life in a sense.
So this was the first idea of the negative impact, a negative impact based on health. You mentioned post-traumatic stress disorder. This then leads to the next one would be the social impact, the psychological impact in terms of, having a lowered self-confidence, etc. Is there any more that you'd like to shed in terms of the social impact?
I think children are most impacted emotionally and socially in that sense. All right. One is the sexual and physical that children are exposed to, but they're growing up with that. So emotionally scarred from a young age and growing up in a society where violence sometimes is a norm for them. It's a very scary thing.
Okay, so we've covered the health impact, the emotional impact, and I think what's also important to outline, time permitting, would look at the economic impact of violence against women and children. Hopefully, inshallah, we'll be able to touch on that and few other aspects after we take this quick break.
صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه.
Welcome back to the show. Before the break, we were discussing the impact, the negative impact of violence against women and children. We touched on the psychological impact, we touched on the health impact, and I said that we would touch on briefly the economic impact. In some instances, many of the women who are abused are also happen to be breadwinners or people who contribute to the maintenance of the home. This, we mentioned in the psychological impact, leads to them having a lowered sense of self-confidence. A lowered sense of self-confidence would lead to productivity that's decreased in the workplace, and naturally the ripple effect would then go on. The same with children who are impacted negatively in terms of their mindsets and their psyches. They would forever have these emotional and mental scars upon themselves. The 16 Days of Activism, Moulana, is a campaign brought about to raise awareness. Tell us about how awareness is raised in this campaign and how each and every citizen of the Ummah and of the globe and lastly of the country can get involved in raising awareness in this international campaign.
All right. One of the very simple ways of showing your support is by wearing a white ribbon. As you can see, Abdul Rahman has one on. I have one as well. So that's a simple way of highlighting your support, that you say no to violence against women and children. Another way is to speak out. In the speak out, we have different platforms where there are specific platforms from government and other departments in the government that have platforms where they speak. But as Muslims, we use our Jummah platform as well, which is a very important platform to discuss these pertinent issues. And they're actually khutbahs that are coordinated through the Jamiatul Ulama South Africa for these days of World AIDS Day and also the violence against women and children. So these are things that are available and that need to be used to create awareness so that we, the public, can get involved.
It's just rather unfortunate that this happens to be at the end of the schooling year. More than most schools in the South African context would be closed. Otherwise, we could have some sort of campaigns or awareness campaigns at schools. I think
this problem is addressed by MAP. Having schools, having programs to create this violence against children, wherein the bullying and that is reported. It's incorporated into their life skills programs when they go and visit schools, so that it be a year project. You see, the 16 Days of Activism is just a guide for us to propel us till the next year of 16 Days of Activism. So it's not just
limited.
We're not limited and active for 16 days and then the rest of the year we can have then we can permit violence No, it's to create awareness so that it can propel us and motivate us and inspire us to carry on till the next year. With regards to, if we have to look at women in Islam, then there are very many narrations that could guide us to that. But one of the narrations is where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that خِيَارُكُمْ خِيَارُكُمْ لِأَهْلِ وَأَنَا خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِ, or as mentioned as the Prophet ﷺ, where the translation would be that the best of you is the best of you in terms of your character, in terms of personality, in terms of being a person, a human, is those people that are the best to their women. And the Prophet further mentioned that I show the best of character to my women. So this is showing that this goodness and kindness and looking out and protection of our women is something that is very deep and threaded into the teachings of Islam. And it is part of Islam and not something foreign to Islam.
Moulana, we mentioned wearing the white ribbons, creating awareness by speaking out. There are numerous campaigns by government in terms of allowing women the opportunity to express themselves, especially those who have been the victims of violence, etc. One of these campaigns being run by Gender Links is a campaign where they allow for women to either write or narrate their particular stories. It's also a means of counseling, or getting rid of the trauma where people express what's within them. That allows them to actually feel better and to get that so-called burden off their chest. Are there other initiatives that people could be, or viewers could be made aware of?
There are other initiatives where people, different NGOs and non-governmental organizations would carry out these things. And one that we know is that of course, MAP, Muslim AIDS Program, being it linked to the AIDS pandemic. It is something that they look after and they promote. And then there's also counseling that is offered at the Islamic Care Line and the Hope Line and the Helpline. So all these different organizations promote this. And the Jamiatul Ulama itself, which is run by men per se, clearly highlight that these things need to be cared for because women are an important part of society. And also there's another thing that we need to realize is that we're speaking a lot about women, sometimes forgetting our small children. And this is something that we need to take cognizance of, is that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is very clear with regards to children, where he says that لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يَرْحَمْ صَغِيرَنَا وَلَمْ يَعْرِفْ شَرَفَ كَبِيرِنَا. One is we have to show respect and honor to our elders. That's something that is across the board. But what does the Prophet say? لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يَرْحَمْ صَغِيرَنَا. The first part of the hadith says that he is not from amongst us who does not show mercy to our youngsters. And then the Prophet says, those that do not show honor and revere our elder people. So the primary focus is that we need to show love to our children, and that will make them into the great character and build them into the great character that they need to have to be human beings at the end of the day.
Well, subhanAllah, these are some of the ahadith that speak about women and speak about children. I think at this particular juncture, this time of the year, the time when most people would have more time to spend with their families, it's an opportunity when, firstly, we'd like to thank Moulana for joining us, an opportunity when one and all of us could really make a concerted effort to spend more time and build those bonds with the family unit. Remembering the opening ayat of Surah An-Nisa, where Allah mentions وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ, and be conscious of Allah with regards to the questioning and the accountability with regards to women folk and with regards to what is encapsulated in the wombs, the children, the young, the downtrodden, the orphans, etc. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it such for one and all of us, inshallah, to be from amongst those who champion these and other causes, because in each of them there is a very deeply entrenched Islamic basis. We hope that this has served as a means of highlighting and bringing some sort of awareness to you with regards to the 16 days of activism commemorating no violence against women and children. And we hope, inshallah, that each and every one of us can pledge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we will seek to be better citizens of the ummah, and inshallah those who are the leaders in these and other campaigns. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما. 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 صلوا عليه.